करेंगे ये यूनिट 10 है स्पेंसर्स पोइट्री। ये पार्ट 1 है स्पेंसर्स पोइट्री का। इंट्रोडक्शन पार्ट हम स्टार्ट करते हैं। दिस यूनिट विल अटेम्प्ट टू ऑफर एन overview of Spenser's well-known sonnet sequence, the Amority sonnets, focusing primarily on formal elements and literary influences. It will offer analysis of three sonnets from the Amority. The influence in particular of Italian court poets like Petrarch and the reworking of the sonnet will be explored. The earlier mentioned conflict between Christian and Platonic means Protestant visions, especially of love and eroticism, will be touched upon. To bring with, we will in what follows immediately, we will examine some aspects of the sonnet and of the courtly love tradition which Spenser was part of. Sonnet, पहले हम sonnet की बात करेंगे. An important point to remember while reading the poems and the following notes is that the sonnet is fundamentally a short lyric, a stylized 14-line poem that developed in Italy in the Middle Ages. There are broadly three styles of sonnets. The Petrarchan का मतलब है which is the most common, consisting of an octave means 8 lines and a sestet means 6 lines, तो हो गए 14 lines total. The Spenserian, उसके बाद आता है Spenserian sonnet which has 4 quatrains, 3 quatrains है, ये बुक में गलत लिखा है 4 quatrains, 3 quatrains and a couplet. ठीक है, मतलब एक पैराग्राफ में 4 लाइन्स, क्वाट्रेंस में 4 लाइन्स होंगी तो 3 पैराग्राफ बन गए 4 लाइन्स के और एक कपलेट. राइमिंग, इसकी राइम स्कीम है ए बी बी सी एंड सी डी एंड ई. ये इजी सा है स्पेंसेरियन सोनेट. जैसे ए के बाद बी आता है, ए बी फिर बी सी फिर सी डी करके ऐसे, फिर ई कपलेट बाद में आ जाता है. एंड द शेक्सपियरियन which follows the Spenserian line scheme of 3 quatrains and a couplet. इसमें जो ना line scheme सेम है, ठीक है. 4 लाइन्स के 3 पैराग्राफ्स होंगे, उसमें मतलब क्वाट्रेंस होंगे, 3 क्वाट्रेंस होंगे एंड एक कपलेट होगा, तो 12 लाइन्स होगी. बट डिफर इन इट्स राइम स्कीम. बट इसकी जो राइम स्कीम है ना थोड़ी डिफरेंट होती है. जैसे कि ए बी होती है, फिर होती है सी डी होती है, फिर ई एफ होती है, फिर जी होती है. ये याद रखना पड़ेगा हमेशा. द सोनेट बिकेम पॉपुलर इन इटालियन पोइट्री एज अ vehicle for the expression of love and sensuality, a heritage that carried with it into its English version. Okay, now Petrarch was the Italian poet most well known for this practice, and his ये थोड़ा पढ़ना पड़ेगा. and his just wait, कंजोनियर पढ़ते हैं इसको, है ना, कैंजोनियर. A collection of love sonnets is a sort of literary compendium होता है a collection of the passions of the lover. The sonnet is in many ways the most appropriate form for the articulation and expression of the kind of sentiments that came to be characterized as courtly love. Its brevity means जो इसका compactness है ना, its brevity prevents excessive sentiment from becoming sententious होता है information, है ना, and forcing such sentiment sensual type हो गया है ना, sententious, and forcing such sentiment to be articulated through intense imagery and condensed rhythms. At the same time, its internal organization allows the poet a degree of flexibility and innovativeness in terms of constructing the poem as a dramatic movement or series of moments that mirror the moments of his own passion and feelings. One of the important virtues of any courtier, according to the influential Italian writer Castiglione in the book of the courtier, which served as the conduct book of sort for many Elizabethan courtiers, was moderation. तो मैं फिर से पढ़ती हूँ. One of the most important virtue of any courtier, according to the influential Italian writer Castiglione, in the book of the courtiers, was moderation. We can see how important the sonnet was as a form of the lyric that held on moderation, even as it hinted at the overwhelming passions of the courtly love. Perhaps most significantly, it allowed the poet to present love as an intense yet elusive. Elusive होता है difficult to find, I think so. हाँ, difficult to find. Almost ephemeral. Ephemeral होता है short lived and transworldly feeling. An ideology of love that characterized the poetry of the courtly love tradition. In this sense, the sonnet was the ideal form for the articulation of this dominant conception of love in the Renaissance. Let us briefly examine this phenomena. The courtly love tradition in poetry. When Sir Thomas Wyatt, ये मैं ना पिछले वाले वीडियोस में गलत प्रोनाउंसिएशन किया है इसका, WYATT, वायट है ये, एंड द अर्ल ऑफ सरी, सरी भी मैंने गलत बोला था पिछले वीडियो में, सरी है, SURREY, सरी, translated Petrarch's work into English in the 16th century. It was to prove tremendously influential. The sonnets initiated a way of thinking and writing about love in English poetry that was fundamentally chivalric, based on feudal themes and ideas, and centered on the figure of the beloved as mistress of the poet. This way of thinking about love, or ideology of love, was first formed in the troubadour poetry. In the troubadour का क्या मतलब था? Just wait. Troubadour means singing poetry, है ना? Troubadour poetry means singing poetry of Aquitaine. Aquitaine होता है release और and Provence होता है worship. In southern France towards the end of the 11th century, from where its influence spread to Italy and the rest of the Europe. One may describe its basic tenet as the following: the celebration of adultery, the near deification होता है worship of the mistress, and the love as very often unrequited means unrequired in his love, means जो लेडी है वो तो वर्शिप्ड, उसको इस तरह से बोला जाए कि उसकी जैसे पूजा ही कर दी जाती है, और जो मैन है, मेल है, वो अनरिक्वायर्ड है, उसकी कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है. एंड समवट पैराडॉक्सिकली the celebration of faithful service to the beloved. There were several reasons for the emergence of this particular ideology of love. Medieval Europe in the early part of the last millennium was controlled by feuding warlords, protected and surrounded by armies of knights who owed allegiance means support entirely to their respective barons. One means of forming alliances amongst these lords was through marriage between their houses. These marriages of convenience meant that the lady of the castle was often not very close to the lord, and even neglected by her husband. Since the castle populations were predominantly male with few women, the lady inevitably came to be the recipient of the amorous attention of the many knights and courtiers. The passions thus evoked were often torn by the opposite demands of fidelity. Fidelity means loyalty to the Lord, and desire for the beloved. Equally important were the roles of the Catholic imagination of the Virgin Mary on the one hand, and the pre-Christian tribal conception of women as powerful beings on the other. They led to the beloved because of her social inaccessibility, often being represented as quasi divine. Quasi divine होता है false, क्वेजाई है ये, क्वेजाई डिवाइन, QUASI, especially in poetry. It is from this peculiar conjunction of social and historical factors that the poetry of courtly love carries the paradoxical discourses of adultery and fidelity, means loyalty. Intense physical passion celebrated in an idealized, almost spiritualized fashion. Poets in particular had a few predecessors to turn to chart this new mixture of emotions. Although the Latin's poet Ovid, in his Ars Amatoria, um, which pictured the lover as the slave of his passion and therefore of his beloved, was to prove singularly influential. The poetry that emerged from this context spread swiftly, बहुत तेजी से, through medieval Europe. C.S. Lewis, old but classic study. The allegory of love is worth exploring for a more detailed understanding of this phenomena. However, by the time it reached England in the 16th century, several other factors came to play a decisive role in changing its characteristic features. Poets like Sidney and Surrey continued in the vein of the old country love poetry, particularly with the arrival of Elizabeth to the throne of England. Vein means inclination, उनका inclination इसी तरफ था. She epitomized means typical of something, epitomize है ना, the type of the inaccessible mistress even more sharply than the figures of the beloved in earlier poetry, and inspired the same kind of mixed and paradoxical fervor. Okay, now the beloved in the courtier poetry of the time was thus frequently compared in her inaccessibility to the queen herself. The important difference was that Elizabeth, as queen, besides being truly unattainable, was also functionally both lord and lady. The courtier owed allegiance. Allegiance means ये lustful and fidelity. ठीक है. This resulted in an intensification of the language of deification, even worship in the English poets. It is only in Spenser's verse that a new language is forged. Forged means invented. Using the amorous, lustful. Amorous means lustful with the divine in a way that liberated both from the contradictory pull of the other. We have noticed in the earlier units some of the reasons for the emergence of Spenser as a new kind of poet. What we need to note here is that spread of a strict Protestant moral code contributed to the making of Spenser's poetry. This code broke with the worship of the beloved in the mold of the Virgin Mary, given her more this worldly, thereby enhancing her desirability while simultaneously insisting on the importance of maintaining sexuality and desire within conjugal bounds, marital bounds. It must be noted here that such a language of restraint, means shant, was already available in the more Platonic conception of love to be found in Petrarch. But Spenser's genius lay in aligning that language with a more Protestant stress on the importance of marriage for sexuality. In this sense, the language of love that we will see in the Amoreti sonnets and in the Epithalamion later display the shift from the earlier codes of courtly love to a more celebratory, this worldly, and therefore realizable love that nevertheless emphasizes the sanctity, means holiness of the love itself. Let us now examine the three sonnets of Amoreti chosen for study in this light. तीन जो sonnets हैं हम next video में करेंगे. Thank you very much.